Zuri's cheek still stung from her father's slap, but it was the words that cut deeper. "You're no daughter of mine," he said, his voice trembling with disgust. The guests at the family estate froze. No one dared to move. The man who'd raised her, who'd called her his firstborn, had just disowned her in front of everyone. And then the next day, she got the call from the lawyers. They said her name wasn't Zuri Adewale, and she wasn't even supposed to be part of the Adewale family at all. What they revealed next would change everything she ever knew about love, loyalty, and blood. The night was meant to be perfect. The lights shimmered, music played softly, and guests in glittering clothes filled the Adewale mansion. Zuri had planned every detail: the golden decorations, the cake with her father's favorite flavor, even the slideshow of his childhood memories. She wanted to see him smile, to hear him say he was proud of her. For weeks, she had barely slept, making sure everything was flawless for his 60th birthday. When her father stood to give his speech, her heart swelled with hope. He raised his glass and began thanking everyone: his wife Nola, his business partners, his sons, but not her. Zuri waited, thinking he would mention her at the end. But he didn't. His eyes skipped over her like she didn't exist. Her chest tightened, confusion filling her. When the applause faded, she stepped forward quietly and asked, "Dad, did I do something wrong?" The room went still. Her father turned toward her, his smile gone. "You know what you did," he said coldly. Zuri blinked in shock. "I don't understand," she began, but he cut her off sharply. "Don't play innocent. You stole from the family trust." Gasps echoed around the room. Zuri's heart stopped. "What? No, I would never," she tried to explain, her voice trembling, but before she could finish, his hand came across her face. The sound was sharp, the pain burning, but what hurt most was seeing the hatred in his eye. Every guest froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Zuri stood there, tears blurring her vision, her hand on her cheek. Her father turned away, his voice shaking with anger as he said, "You're no daughter of mine." Her world collapsed right there, in front of everyone she'd ever known. She looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to defend her, but all she saw were lowered eyes and whispers. Even her stepmother, Nola, stood in the corner, smirking slightly, like she had been waiting for this moment. Zuri felt her knees weaken, her chest aching with disbelief. All her life she had tried to earn her father's love, to make him proud, to prove she belonged. And in one cruel moment, he had thrown her away like she was nothing. As she walked out of the mansion, the party music started again. But for her, everything was already over. The next morning, Zuri woke up hoping it had all been a bad dream. But when she stepped out of her room, she saw boxes stacked in the hallway. Her clothes, shoes, and pictures, everything she owned, were packed away. Standing by the door was her stepmother, Nola, dressed perfectly as always, holding a cup of tea. "It's better this way," Nola said with a fake smile. "You brought this on yourself." Zuri's heart sank. "Please, I didn't steal anything," she whispered, but Nola only shrugged and said, "Your father has made his decision." A few moments later, the family lawyer arrived, holding a brown envelope. He didn't meet Zuri's eyes as he handed it to her. Inside was a document stating she had been removed from the Adewale inheritance. All $31 million of it. Her name had been erased like she never existed. "Mr. Adewale doesn't wish to see you," the lawyer said softly, his voice filled with discomfort. "He asked that you leave the premises immediately." Zuri's hands trembled. "Not even to say goodbye?" she asked, her voice cracking. The lawyer said nothing. Nola turned away, sipping her tea, and the guards began carrying her boxes outside. Zuri wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but no words came out. She walked down the long marble hallway, past the family portraits on the wall. Her father smiling proudly, Nola beside him, and her siblings all looking perfect. Her picture was there too, but for how long? Outside, the driver stood waiting, his eyes full of pity. "Miss Zuri, where should I take you?" he asked quietly. She didn't know. The mansion behind her, once her home, now felt like a stranger's house. She had nowhere to go, no money, and no explanation for why the people she loved had turned against her overnight. She opened her last box and found one thing she couldn't leave behind: her late mother's old journal. It was the only piece of love she had left. She hugged it tightly to her chest, her tears falling on the worn leather cover. She didn't know that inside those pages waited the truth that would change everything. With one last look at the mansion gates closing behind her, Zuri walked away, her steps heavy but her heart slowly filling with one question that refused to leave her mind. Why had her father suddenly hated her? Zuri stayed with her best friend, Tobe, in her small apartment at the edge of Abuja. The room was quiet, far different from the grand mansion she once called home. Every night, she lay awake, replaying her father's words in her mind. The pain didn't fade, but the silence around her gave her time to think. One evening, she sat by the window, holding her late mother's journal. It was old and soft from years of use, the cover cracked at the edges. She opened it, hoping to feel close to her mother again, to find peace in her words. The pages were filled with her mother's handwriting, notes about her favorite songs, memories of Zuri's childhood, and prayers for her to grow into a kind and strong woman. Zuri smiled through tears as she read, but then something caught her eye. Near the back of the journal, one page seemed thicker than the rest. She gently pulled it apart, and found a folded paper hidden between the pages. Her heart began to beat faster. The letter was old, yellow at the edges, and the ink had faded slightly. At the top it said, "To the Adewale family," and it was signed by someone named Saad. The date shocked her. It was written months before she was born. Zuri frowned, whispering the name under her breath. She had never heard of any Saad connected to her family. Curious, she began to read. The words felt strange, heavy, almost like a secret she wasn't supposed to see. The letter talked about a baby girl, about an exchange, and about a promise that had been broken. Then came the line that made her hands shake. "If you hide the truth, it will destroy you all." Zuri's mind spun. What exchange? What truth? Who was this woman named Saad? And what did she have to do with her family? She read the letter again and again, searching for answers, but it only raised more questions. Tobe found her sitting frozen on the bed, the letter trembling in her hands. "Zuri, what's wrong?" she asked, but Zuri could barely speak. This letter," she whispered. "It's like my whole life is a lie." That night, Zuri couldn't sleep. The words from the letter kept echoing in her mind. "If you hide the truth, it will destroy you all." She didn't know what it meant yet, but deep down she felt it. Her story was only just beginning. Zuri couldn't stop thinking about the letter. Every word from it lived in her mind, repeating over and over. The name Saad, the warning, the talk about a baby exchange. It all felt connected to her somehow. She tried to convince herself it was just some old family misunderstanding, but deep inside, something told her the truth was much bigger. She needed proof. She needed answers that no one could deny. One evening, as she unpacked the few things she had brought from the mansion, her eyes fell on an old hairbrush she had taken from her father's study years ago. It was still in her bag. She remembered how he used it every morning, how she had once thought it was silly to keep it as a memory of him. But now that simple object could hold the key to everything. Carefully, she took out one strand of hair tangled in the brush. Her hands shook as she placed it in a small plastic bag. The next day, she searched online for a private DNA testing service. She didn't tell Tobe, didn't tell anyone. It was too painful to even imagine what she might find. She mailed her own saliva sample along with the hair and waited. Each day felt endless. She couldn't eat or focus. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped. When the results finally arrived in her inbox, she hesitated before opening them. Her fingers froze over the screen. Taking a deep breath, she clicked the email. The words blurred for a moment before she focused on one line that changed everything. No biological relation detected. Her heart dropped. 0%. Not a trace of connection. The man she had called Dad, her entire life, wasn't her father. Zuri stared at the screen, tears streaming down her face. She whispered to herself, "Then who am I?" The thought hit her like a wave. Everything, her name, her family, her childhood, suddenly felt like a story someone had written for her. Her mother's journal, the hidden letter, her father's sudden anger. It all made terrible sense now. She tried to remember moments from her childhood, wondering if there had been any signs, maybe the way Nola looked at her, or how her father sometimes avoided her eyes. Had everyone known but her? Zuri felt her world collapse again, but this time, it wasn't just pain, it was anger. The people she trusted had built her entire life on a lie. She closed her laptop and whispered through tears, "If they lied about who I am, then I'll find the truth myself." Zuri couldn't stop thinking about the DNA results. The words "no relation detected" kept echoing in her mind like a painful reminder that her whole life had been built on lies. But she still needed answers. She wanted to know why her father had accused her of stealing, and what had really happened behind her back. So, one morning, she gathered her courage and went to the Adewale family's law firm. The tall glass building stood proudly in the center of Abuja, a place she had visited many times before with her father, but this time, she walked in as an outsider. When she entered, the receptionist looked surprised but didn't say anything. "I need to see Mr. Kudo," Zuri said quietly. Moments later, the elderly lawyer appeared. His expression changed the moment he saw her. Not with anger, but with something that looked like guilt. "Miss Zuri," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I didn't expect to see you." "I just want the truth," she said softly. "Why did he say I stole from him? What did I ever do wrong?" Mr. Kudo looked around the room nervously, and then closed the door. He walked to a large filing cabinet, unlocked it, and took out a sealed envelope from a folder labeled "Private" for Zuri, only upon Patriarch's death. He hesitated before handing it over. "This was never supposed to be opened yet," he murmured. "But your father recently made some changes to his will, and it seems the system triggered this early by mistake." Zuri frowned. "What's inside?" she asked, her voice shaking. He sighed deeply. "Something your mother left behind. Something that could change everything you know about yourself." Zuri's hands trembled as she broke the seal and unfolded the papers. The first page was a letter, her mother's handwriting, but the words were heavy and unfamiliar. It spoke about the child we could not have, and a debt owed to Saad. Then came the line that froze her blood. "If anyone ever finds out about the baby exchange, it will destroy us." Zuri looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Baby exchange? What does this mean?" Mr. Kudo's face turned pale. "I shouldn't be saying this," he said quiet. "But your birth, it wasn't ordinary. There were secrets your father buried long ago. Secrets that were never meant to come out." Zuri's heart pounded as she folded the letter back into the envelope. She walked out of the office in silence, the truth pressing heavily on her chest. She now knew. Her story was darker than she ever imagined, and she was only at the beginning of uncovering it. Zuri sat alone in her small room, staring at the letter she had taken from the lawyer's office. Her hands shook as she unfolded it again, her heart pounding. She needed to know everything. The handwriting was neat but faded, and as she read, each line pulled her deeper into a truth she had never imagined. The letter began with the words, "My name is Saad, and if you are reading this, the truth has finally found its way to you." Zuri frowned, whispering the name softly. Saad, the same name from the hidden letter in her mother's journal. Her chest tightened as she read on. Saad wrote that she had once worked as a maid in the Adewale mansion many years ago. She described her life with honesty, how she was poor but proud, how she gave birth to a baby girl who was taken from her just hours after delivery. She had been told the baby had died, but she never believed it. She remembered hearing a newborn's cry echoing from another room that same night. When she asked questions, she was fired and told to leave immediately. Zuri's eyes filled with tears as she kept reading. The next part made her hand cover her mouth in shock. The letter said that the Adewale's own baby had been stillborn that same night. To protect their reputation and avoid public scandal, they replaced the lifeless child with Sada's baby, the one who had survived. That baby was Zuri. The adoption papers were forged, the truth buried under money and power. The woman Zuri had called mother, her whole life had been part of it too. It wasn't out of love, it was desperation. And when Saad began searching for her daughter, threatening to go to the police, she was silenced forever. Zuri's tears fell onto the paper as she read the final line. "If you are my daughter, know that I never stopped looking for you. They may have taken you from me, but my love has always belonged to you." She couldn't breathe. Her mind screamed that it couldn't be true, but her heart knew it was. Everything fit. Her father's anger, the secret files, the letter, the DNA test. She wasn't Zuri Adewale, the rich man's daughter. She was the child of a poor maid, stolen to replace a dead baby. For the first time in her life, Zuri didn't just feel betrayed, she felt stolen. Zuri couldn't stay still after reading the letter. Every word felt like a piece of her heart being torn apart. She needed to know more, to see the faces of the people who truly belonged to her. The letter had mentioned a small village in Kaduna, where Sada's family once lived. Without telling anyone, Zuri packed a small bag, bought a bus ticket, and began her journey. The road was long and dusty, and her thoughts never stopped racing. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure who she really was, but she was determined to find out. When she arrived in the quiet village, people watched her curiously. She was dressed neatly, clearly from the city, but there was something familiar in her eyes, something that made them stare a little longer. She asked around gently, mentioning the name Saad. Most people went silent, until an older man pointed her toward a small house at the edge of the village. "Go there," he said softly. "You'll find someone who remembers." Zuri walked up to the little clay house and knocked. An old woman opened the door, her hands trembling slightly. The moment she saw Zuri, her eyes widened. Tears instantly filled them. "Oh my God," the woman whispered. "You have her eyes." Zuri froze. "You knew Saad?" she asked, her voice shaking. The woman nodded slowly. "I'm her sister," she said, her voice weak with emotion. "You look just like her. Every line of your face, every glance, it's her." Zuri felt her knees weaken as tears blurred her vision. "Please tell me about her," she begged. The old woman led her inside and began to speak. She told Zuri that Saad had been kind, hardworking, and deeply loving. She had never accepted the story that her baby had died. For years she searched everywhere, even returning to the Adewale estate, begging for answers. The villagers had warned her to stop, saying powerful people were involved, but she never gave up. Then one day she didn't come home. Her body was found near the Adewale gates. Everyone knew what had happened, but no one dared to speak. Zuri broke down completely, her sobs shaking her body. She had lived her entire life surrounded by comfort and wealth, never realizing it was built on someone else's pain, her own mother's. The old woman held her and whispered, "Your mother never stopped loving you. Even when they took you, her heart never let you go." At that moment, Zuri understood. She had been stolen, but she still carried her real mother's heart within her. Zuri returned to Abuja with her heart burning. The truth she had learned in Kaduna gave her strength she never knew she had. The image of her mother's sister crying, the story of Sada's death, it all filled her with a quiet fury. She was no longer the broken girl who had left that mansion in shame. She was the daughter of a woman who had been silenced, and she was ready to speak for both of them. The city lights looked different now as she drove toward the Adewale mansion. She wasn't coming to beg or cry. She was coming for justice. When she entered the grand gates, the guards tried to stop her, but she held up the folder in her hand. "Tell him," she said firmly. "His real daughter has come home." Her father sat in his study, looking startled when she appeared. His face turned pale as Zuri placed the documents on the desk, the DNA results, the forged adoption papers, and Sada's letters. "You stole my life," she said quietly. "You took me from my mother and built your empire on her pain." He stood up, trying to stay calm. "You don't understand," he began, but she cut him off. "No, you don't understand. You killed the truth because it didn't fit your image. And now, everyone will know." At that moment, Nola walked in. When she saw the documents, panic flashed across her face. She grabbed the papers, trying to tear them apart. "These are lies," she shouted. "You're nothing but a mistake." But before she could destroy anything, another voice spoke from the doorway. Adira, the young lawyer who had once worked quietly in her father's office. "Actually," Adira said firmly, "those are official records, and copies have already been submitted to the court." She looked at Zuri and nodded. "You did the right thing." Zuri felt tears of relief fill her eyes as she realized someone was finally standing beside her. Within days, investigations began. The Adewale family's name filled every newspaper and TV screen. Headlines read, "Heir cut from $31 million will." Turns out she was the real victim. The once powerful Adewale empire started to crumble as the truth spread. Forged documents, hidden payments, and the shocking kidnapping that had been buried for 25 years. Zuri didn't celebrate. She simply stood in front of the mansion one last time, watching the gates close behind her. She had lost her family, but she had gained her truth, and that was worth everything. Weeks passed after the court hearing, and the Adewale mansion that once looked untouchable now stood surrounded by police cars and reporters. The powerful family that once looked down on everyone was now trembling. The court had ordered all of their assets frozen until the investigation was complete. No one could touch the money, not even for their morning coffee. The empire that had looked unbreakable was falling apart, piece by piece. While Zuri stayed quiet, trying to process everything, she received a call from Kaduna. It was Sada's sister, the woman who had told her the truth about her mother. Her voice shook with emotion as she said, "Zuri, there's something else you need to see." Zuri traveled back to the village, not knowing what to expect. When she arrived, the old woman handed her a folded envelope. Another will, written by Sad herself before she died. Inside it was a land document, worn and faded but still legal. It showed that a large piece of land in Abuja, the same land where one of the Adewale estates now stood, had originally belonged to Sada's family. The Adewales had bought it years ago using fake papers after Sada's death. Zuri felt her hands tremble as she read the document. Her mother had owned this land. Her family had built their wealth on stolen soil. "So the mansion," she whispered, "is on my mother's land?" The old woman nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, my dear. That land is yours by blood and law." When Zuri's lawyer, Adira, presented the document to the court, the judges were stunned. After reviewing it, they confirmed the shocking truth. The Adewale mansion and the land beneath it legally belonged to Sada's descendants. And since Zuri was her only child, everything was now hers. The news spread like wildfire. Headlines flooded social media. Zuri Adewale declared legal owner of multi-million estate. Cameras flashed everywhere. The same people who once mocked her were now whispering her name in awe. When the official papers were handed to her, Zuri stood outside the mansion gate again. This time not as a servant, not as a rejected daughter, but as the rightful heir. The guards bowed slightly, waiting for her command. She looked at the house that once made her feel small and smiled softly. "It's not about revenge," she said quietly to herself. "It's about justice. And my mother finally getting her peace." Months later, Zuri returned to the mansion. Gates. The same place where her heart had once broken, where she had been called a thief and thrown out with nothing. But this time the air felt different. The grand house behind the gates now legally belonged to her. Everyone expected her to move in, to claim the luxury that had been denied to her. But Zuri didn't. She knew that walls built on pain didn't need to be lived in. They needed to be transformed. Instead of turning it into her home, she made it something far more powerful. She renamed the estate Sada's Haven, a safe house for children rescued from trafficking and abuse. The same halls that once hid lies and greed now echoed with laughter and healing. Every corner carried a new purpose. Every room told a new story, one of hope. When a journalist visited for an interview, cameras flashing, they asked the question everyone wanted to know. "Do you hate your father for what he did?" Zuri paused, her eyes thoughtful. A faint smile appeared on her face as she replied, "I don't hate the man who raised me, but I mourn the one who never tried to know who I really was." Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight, the kind that comes from pain turned into strength. After the interview, as she prepared to leave, the same lawyer who once handed her the letter that destroyed her world approached her again. He held out a white envelope, his expression softer this time. "It's official," he said quietly. "Your real name has been restored." Zuri opened it and saw the new document. Her full name was printed clearly. Zuri Sad Oyewale. The name her real mother had given her. The name she was never allowed to live with. She looked up at the sky, tears filling her eyes but a smile resting on her lips. "Mama," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They stole me, but I found my way home." The wind brushed gently against her face, and in that moment she felt peace. Not just for herself, but for her mother, whose love had reached her even after death. Zuri turned away from the mansion, walking toward the children playing in the garden. Her story, once filled with loss, had become a story of rebirth. She wasn't just the stolen daughter anymore. She was the woman who reclaimed her truth and gave hope to others who had none.